This shape has arrived, so it means I can complete the primary form assembly. I'm going to be too nervous gluing it to film it probably. There's 7mm slots and 6mm acrylic, so there's a lot of give, so I'll have to work harder at the jig. I'm glad now that I've got the gel solvent rather than the watery one. This 42mm pipe cutter from Bunnings wins shit product of the week.
Shit product of the week.
Not only can it not cut, but if you try to turn it, it just makes a massive thread and ruins the whole tube. I was using this to try to make a jig for the primary assembly. Mind you, a real pipe cutter will just follow the indentation it's already made. I was given a syringe that was originally used to prime model aircraft engines. It had nothing to do with this glue, so I heated it all up with a blow dryer, then used super glue and hot glue, and finally heat shrink to attach it. I was originally planning to use these spacers as part of the jig for setting the assembly together, but they're nowhere near consistent. They're 2 or 3 mils apart from each other, so I've decided to use this piece of part of the protection of a reel of plumbing tape. And this is how the jig looked when I actually glued the pieces in. Just pulled one out, did the glue, put it back in piece by piece. Then all that was left was to simply cut out the spacers with scissors. And this is just resting in place for a mock-up at the moment to have a look. I'm going to wind the coil onto it separately before gluing it to the rest of the assembly. This is not the actual copper form I'm planning to use. This one's a little short and not neat enough, but a similar thing, same size, same material. I've explained in a previous video that turning half of these struts upside down will offset their slots by 2mm and hopefully allow the copper to be threaded. This one's just an offcut, but if I cut a few slots off individually, I might be able to use them to lead some copper around. Not a lot to the thing. I only brought this to pull apart, but it's exactly the same as a Slayer exciter circuit, aside from having a charging circuit for the LiPo battery. It has the same resistor and diode to the left here, and MGA 3055T surface mount variant, and capacitor. Exactly the same as the components I used, and the coils are all hidden away in a box. It'll happily light a pigtail neon, but the transistor doesn't have heat sinking to the case or anything like that, so I don't imagine it'll last too long continuous. I started playing around with toroids in the last video. I've got this HY2 powdered iron material, they call it, from JCar Australia, and I've finally got one to work in sub-megahertz. This one's center frequency is close to 700 kilohertz. And you can see me switch it in and out of the circuit here. The switch just short circuits the inductor so it can switch the whole suppressor in and out of the circuit. Then what I'm doing is tuning the signal generator at a lower frequency so you can see the signal come back again. And then finally back up around the 700 kilohertz area. I think this cool 5K is new for my videos, and maybe this 1000. And this is just the reverse of the same 1000. There's one more I'm chasing from eBay, but I want it uncirculated. Digital electronics. I've got my third solid state relay now, and a nice clean new unbroken Toslink cable. I've painted yet another LCD in black epoxy enamel, and since I can't decide which LCD I'm going to use, I've added a D connector to the control module. I can receive a signal from the lighters oscillator on my scope, and I've measured the signal at 17.44 kilohertz. I can't hear that when I generate it on a PC, but if I record the lighter in slow motion, an audio signal can be heard. When I glued this assembly together, I applied the solvent only to the edges of the slots, so I might finish it up with some watery solvent. At least it's together and I won't have to worry about a jig. The Acrobond 105 did arrive today, and that's the real watery, runny one. It comes supplied with a syringe and a needle tip. I don't think that's very useful because it's not very flexible, you can't squeeze it. So I've brought an applicator from a craft shop. I'm doing the rest of this narration from a roadside rest area, so I'll try and avoid the noise of the cars going by. I've shown about as much as I can for the completed stuff, and as I'm speaking I've just been to JCar to buy some stuff for the things coming up, and that was a big toroid to see what I can do with that. And I've got DB9 female connectors to reconnect the LCD, and some black wire for wrapping toroids. And speaking of toroids, these are too colourful, so I'm going to paint them. Let's see. Machinery grey. They'll be wound with the black insulated wrap wire that I just showed you, so that should look pretty awesome. I'm planning to enclose this flyback transformer in PVC and paint that as well. I'll rewind the primary with all black wire and neaten it up, and the boot there should stick out of a drill hole. If you want to interface to an LCD with a HD 44780 controller, you can do so with 11 conductors if you want to read from the LCD, but if you don't, you can get away with 10 and control the backlight and contrast. Finally, for this video I've reconnected the LCD module.